welcome back, everyone. We appreciate you sticking with us. And we have a wonderful panel from not our anthology group, so we will update that information right now. And we have our small to mid-size press, Trailblazers. And we're excited to hear all the stories that they have to share with us today. So I'm going to kindly step out and let them shine. And with no further ado, please meet your panelists.
Hi, I'm Veronique. I'm houxbois. I was one of the judges for this category, and I'm a queer trans cartoonist and critic and consultant and general e-girl. So party, that's me.
Nice, amazing, hard to follow that. My name is Gabi Mendez. Queer cartoonist as well. I've done a lot of very small self-publishing, and I'm a finalist. That's right. For my book, Eliminate Summer, which was a collection of short queer stories, mainly books that youth, but also for everyone, because that's what I do. I love making short queer stories for just anyone. That's me.
My name is Melanie Gillman. I'm another finalist for this year's book, Stage Dreams, which is a lesbian Western graphic novel. They, them pronouns for me. I'm a queer and non-binary cartoonist, and very excited to be here.
Great. And lastly, I'm Noella Whitney. I was a judge this year for this category, and I am an illustrator and comic artist, and I was a 2018 short form winner. That's about it.
Cool. So, some short comics, huh?
Yeah. Mostly short comics. Sorry.
So it's
sorry. There's a bit of lag here, so it's like, all right. Sorry, did you stop? Did I stop? Can you hear me? Sorry.
It's just like when you're watching the news and you see them standing there, and so we'll be respectful to leave some space due to the little bit of lag that might be going on. So we'll be respectful of that. To get things started, one of the things we tend to organize the awards by format. So sort of the easiest way that I find to get started with these conversations is what is unique about working as or working with a small to mid-sized press that allows you to do the work that you want to do, or on the judge's side, what is it about that small to mid-sized press area of creation that attracts you to want to be part of the judging panel, to want to think about what makes that area the best of the best.
I can speak to that a little bit, if no one minds. But working with a small press has been really amazing because, for one, the small press that I worked with was the passion project of a friend, a close friend, who I went to school with. And so just having that very personal level, I was able to really discuss what I wanted out of my project, out of Limited Summer, and just have it understood completely. I have limited experience working with mainstream publishers, but I just know that the overhead isn't so crazy. It's being a queer creator. It's important that I get across exactly my perspective and the perspective of the people around me in the queer community as honestly and as genuinely as possible. And so I was able to say exactly what I needed with these stories and not compromise anything for maybe a more general audience. Because partly I knew that it was going out to a queer audience because I was writing for them. And anyone who wasn't part of the queer audience of the community would see something more real, I think. And that's something I value so much with that experience.
I had kind of a similar experience with mine, where one of the things that initially attracted me to working with small press publishers when doing queer stories and trans stories is that you can sometimes find a little bit more personal attention in a way, and a little bit of like wiggle room in terms of editorial and people being willing to take a chance on a story which maybe doesn't immediately seem like it's going to have a ton of like mainstream appeal. Though it's interesting too, because I think that that's changing very quickly at the mainstream level in comics publishing, especially when we're looking at like kids and YA comics right now. So it's interesting because everything is in flux, but I do still think that there's a really important space that the small press occupies in terms of queer and trans storytelling, where it's there to support creators who oftentimes have been kind of pushed aside by mainstream presses, and to create spaces for them where they can tell authentic stories, and stories that don't necessarily have to have their primary goal being like extreme mass marketability. So yeah, it's interesting. Different sectors of the publishing industry for different types of stories out there.
From a judging perspective, like I wasn't really sure what category I was going to come in on, because like a lot of my career, especially like as a critic, has been like the super mainstream, the direct marketing, definitely like the big two, like DC and Marvel. Well, like, I read around different things, right? But the striking thing, which also made it such a challenging and daunting category to judge, was the absurd level of diversity. And I mean this in absolutely every single sense. I mean, just the two comics we're talking about here, if you want to look at like diversity in terms of inclusion, like those are huge, big deals, right? Like you guys are doing amazing, amazing things. Cannot overstate that. But like stylistically, we had stuff that was down from like zine level things. Like we had an entry from Carter Monier's Midsize Press, like Emma Jane's Transports to Town, and then we have like more kind of book market stuff, and then we had things that were like very kind of like, I would call it like direct market style, because it's not like superhero comics, but you still know that like Image, Dark Horse, they kind of play in similar formats and styles. So you would have like this like big broad cyberpunk story, and then you'd have these little personal auto-bio stories, and then you would have like some Lost Bros in there, like literally, and then like Simon Hanselman and like the whole like life side of things. So you're just like, it was almost like everything in comics really was being was being represented. You get Horror Killer in there too, and it's just, it was such a cornucopia, because if you're doing like full mainstream level, then you're going to be doing like Marvel, Image, DC, like the big stuff you kind of know, but also like the range of audiences, because y'all are more like YA and kids stuff, right? But again, like Transmycira Town, definitely a lot more adult, and like more of like the action titles and stuff. So it's just kind of like, it was so cool to get out of like what I had been, I don't want to say stuck into, but what I've been like so laser focused on, to just get this full like re-immersion into like the complete scope of what people are making right now. It was a blessing, a huge blessing to participate in.
Yeah, and kind of bouncing off of that, I feel like just the length that we're looking at for the books, and for these comics, it's that length. It's you can tell a full story in there. You can get like really, really deep into it. Like I've seen, obviously, you have like your 10 pages, your short form comics, and they can be really poignant, but they can't really get into the meat of it. And with small to mid-size press books or publications, they can be any length. Honestly, they could be any length, anything more than, I think what was the limit, like 12 pages or something for the short format. Yeah, you can make them 60, 80, 100, 200 pages, and you can get as deep as you want them. And also, and because of that, because there's such variation in the length, of course you're going to get the different variety of types of stories, because some kinds of stories take more pages to tell than others, and even like Lemonade Summer, it is a bunch of short comics, but when it's all collected it creates this longer narrative about this world, about these characters, and because it's multiple comics about the same characters, compared to Melanie's book, where it's the same two characters in a continuous storyline. Like, yeah, it was very judge, like, with how do you quantify how do you quantify all these different styles? How is this one better than this one, or more put together than this one? So, and also because small to mid-sized publishers, you have like Oni Press in there, and you have like Dark Horse, and those are like, they're not big too, but they're well-known names. They've been around for years. Compared to like Diskette Press, compared to like what was it, Piao? I don't know how to pronounce it. Piao Press or whatever. Yeah, those are smaller prints that have been around less than a decade. But they're all putting out like similar level of work, and it's it's cornucopia. It's a smorgasbord of all these different kinds, and it's just great to see. It's always such a fun challenge.
Just to jump off on that, here's a little bit of a life hack if you are a queer cartoonist and you're going to be submitting to this category in the future, particularly if you're submitting a graphic novel, because like you said, some of these were like short anthology things, short stories or collections or whatever, but like sometimes you'll run into, because we have like a certain segment of them we can look at so we can see everything. So it's like if you have a larger form comic, and not every single page of your comic is queer, because like speaking for the finalists that are here, like you could pick out any 3 pages and you'll get it, right? And it's fine, because like that's not always necessarily the focus of your comic, and that's not disqualifying. But like, please, whether you're the creator or like the editor or publisher submitting for it, make sure that the chunk we're seeing is a relevant one, because like obviously I don't want to like say who, but there was a couple of submissions in there where it was like, I really, really want to go through this comic. It looks dope. But the first 50 or whatever pages, like the segment that I've got, doesn't get to it. And it's just like, because either you know who the creator is, the publisher, whatever. Yeah. You know there's going to be something good in here, but it's just like, it's not there. So like, make sure that you show us that the whole thing isn't just like queer rainbows and stuff on every single page. Then because we want to see what you're at in your queer.
And actually, about the I was a judge for this category last year, which is why I like to be in this category again. The reason that last year's winner won was because they took out, I think it was Meal by Billy. I don't know. I'm so sorry. I'm probably butchering your last name.
Delaconte.
I don't remember. I was right. The reason that book won was because I don't know who it was, if it was Blue, if it was their editor. They took out the relevant pages, and they showed the relevant pages. And even though, I jumped around in the story a little bit, it showed me exactly how this book is relevant to this category that they're applying. Basically applying for this award for. And that, it was because they took out those pages. And I was like, when I read it, I was like, this is jumping around a little bit, but it was all the queer parts, and it showed exactly how the characters were queer and why it mattered why they were queer and what the statement was. Even if it was an entire book or sequential, ironically, even if it wasn't sequential, it still showed me, exactly how this book, why that book should win, and it did. So, there were so many submissions this year, and I was like, I know this, but you're not showing me the queer section of it, and therefore I can't judge you in the way that I want. So a little heartbreaking. People, please edit your submissions.
Yeah, to clarify oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, that's pretty good advice in general for any sort of, like, awards or art grants or anything that you're applying to. Like, look at what the, what are they actually looking for in the directions and try to target the work that you're sending. So you're not just sending your strongest pages, but also the pages that are going to speak to the requirements of that thing that you're applying for. So just, tuck that in your back pocket. Any cartoonists listening to this who are interested in like applying for awards or grants or anything like that, it kind of boils down to the same thing at the end of the day.
Right, that's a great way of putting it. For anyone that is not aware, the awards generally limits around 32 pages for submissions outside of anthologies, just to make sure that we are valuing the time of those judges. So it is a little less like see my creation as a whole, and a little bit more like maybe portfolio submission as a way to think about it.
Yeah.
Actually, I hadn't thought of that. That's really good.
So, I mean, you've mentioned already that the variety of publishers, because it is small to mid-size, that, publishers like Dark Horse still feel in that space, even though some of us may feel like they probably fit more in mainstream. And so far, we've been allowing publishers to self-identify. As judges and as people who are submitting, what do you feel about that? I mean, I'm kind of using this as a self-serving thing to think about the awards for the future. Does that feel like a level playing field, or is that how much do the judges take that into account in terms of how much weight they give to each piece that they see? How do you handle that, or how do you feel about that as your competitors?
I mean, comics is a weird space.
Go ahead, Emma.
Comics is a really weird space, and I think actually Dark Horse is a really good example to kind of point out how weird that space is. Not to get too far into the weeds, but like before the Marvel Disney purchase, Dark Horse had a lot more like big licenses. So they had Star Wars, right, and they've had Alien, I think, at various times. Maybe they still do, or they're hashing that out with Marvel right now because of the Fox purchase, and just stuff like that. But it's like, and like Gerard Way makes like My Chemical Romance comics for them, but he also makes Umbrella Academy, right? And like there's a whole tier of creator-owned and creator-run comics at Dark Horse, right? Because like that company started with like Sin City and Hellboy, like where Frank Miller and Mike Mignola came to play, right? So even within Dark Horse, there's tiers. Even within DC, well, sorry, not anymore. God, sorry, it sounds like I'm going in, I don't mean to, but like back in the day, there was this thing called Vertigo, right? And that was a tier of creator-owned things. So like, what was the circulation for the Invisibles versus like Animal Man, Doom Patrol, Batman, and like, especially the way that DC has busted itself up now, it's not necessarily where there's lower circulation creator-owned things and higher circulation superhero things. There's like the YA and print and that kind of stuff. So to me, it's a weird thing because like, I kind of do like the diversity and the competition of kind of allowing maybe say Dark Horse to compete in those waters, because the judging pool that we have, at least the one that we had this year, is kind of looking beyond the surface level polish of this to see deeper dynamics. So I think that like, I don't know, because there's like one or two other awards that kind of are in our general sphere, but not really, that have one big category, and it's like there's a Marvel comic with a token gay character in it, and it's going to compete against the entire field, and you're just like, well, they're just going to Harvey Weinstein it, they're just going to lobby for it and buy it, and you're like, okay, cool, fun, so we don't have to worry about that so much here, and that's why like the mainstream tier takes that out. So I think it's good, but it's weird. I mean, if you wanted to break it up more within the mid-range, like for size, I would look at circulation, maybe, to be like, what's the audience size if you want to do that. But I think a more pressing concern is to break out a YA category. Because the hardest decision-making process for me was, how the hell do I judge Lemonade Summer or Stage Dreams against Trans Girls Hit the Town? how the F you do that, right? Because Transcript to Town, it's a very adult comic aimed directly at that, right? Whereas you guys are speaking to two different, well, I mean, like the same audience, but a little bit different, right? And like starting at a different range. So it's kind of like, how effectively do they communicate with these audiences? So to me, it's kind of like, especially because YA is breaking out as such an incredible space for LGBTQI representation, and that includes like DC, like the Harley Quinn Breaking Glass, like that Mariko Tamaki Steve Q freaking masterpiece, and that like Aqualad comic that they got like what's her face to draw, the amazing French cartoonist who's like my actual hero in life. But yeah, so you know what I mean. So like to me, if we were gonna split or break around, you could look at circulation numbers, but I would maybe definitely look at breaking out to like a YA category.
It absolutely.
Sorry. What I really liked about judging this is that it kind of evens the playing field between, you know, say those like the more established publishers and the newer publishers. Like it, because you think like, oh my god, like or Image or Dark Horse, oh my god, great. They're great work, and they really like you know that if it's that publisher, it's going to be something that's good usually. Yeah, and all these smaller publishers, all these like I guess for the lack of a better phrase, startup publishers, who are these like Gabi's friend, like it's just a small passion project. And I know at least like 3 other people with passion projects as well. Shout out to Zach and Paloma. Yeah, and all it gets everybody okay. Even though you're at this big publisher, let's take a step back. Let's kind of ignore that and see generally like see what the overall quality of the school is. And comparing the 2 years, the quality this year is definitely higher, and that's making me really excited for the future of this, because if it's getting better, it's improving, then that means that we have more voices coming in, and we're having a lot more conversations about what can be done with this. And it's good. It's good. It's a very and thank God that the mainstream is a separate category, because this is like I think as far as standalone like big what's the word when you have like a big story, when you know
Long format?
this is the category for that long format. No, but when you're like, this is my word, this is my crowning jewel of that one, magnum opus. Sorry, my brain is still a little weird today. When you're making a magnum opus, and you're not big too, then this is your category. It's really nice to see how people interpret that. So yeah. Sorry, was it who was talking? I interrupted someone in the beginning. Gabi, was that you?
I was just going to say that it definitely is daunting to be up against other larger, well, not big 3 or even just big YA, if that's my category, publishers, because of the resources that they do have compared to the resources that I may have, even though I appreciate everything that I've gotten from my small press and the attention that they were able to give to this project because of the small size of it. The resources are different, you know. We don't have as much time and money to put into the projects that we really do care about. So the products may come out different. And of course the reach will be different too, because I know that the Technology panel was talking about Kickstarter and the breadth that it may reach and the things that it has and the things that it takes. It can only reach a very specific audience, which is the ones that it's advertised to, the ones that we self-advertise to, and the backers who back it. So it's, when talking about circulation, it's a lot of groundwork for the creator and the publisher and the resources. Whereas it's difficult to say too with these mid-range publishers. The lesser known you are, maybe the less resources they may put into circulation of those creators as well, because bigger names may merit more publication. But there's still a distance that we may not be able to reach as the small publishers, the startup publishers, I'd say. So it's daunting. It is daunting being up against them, but it's also an honor and a privilege to be all of us with this crazy wide diversity to be included together in one category. Though I do agree it might be nice to have a YA section because it's such a boom right
now. Yeah. Going off of what Gabi was saying, like one of the really interesting stumbling blocks that's facing especially small press graphic novel publishers right now is things like school and library distribution, which has to go through, I think it's the Baker and Taylor catalog right now, and you can't get that level of distribution unless your publisher is putting out a minimum number of books per year. I think it's around 10 books per year, and that's like graphic novel size books, not like mini comics or like floppy comics. So that can be a significant hurdle for a lot of the smaller press publishers, and that also means that there are like very wide markets that are really thriving in comics right now. Like libraries are so excited about comics right now, which is wonderful. But we're still facing that stumbling block for the smaller presses who aren't able to hit that like volume level in terms of the number of books that they're putting out every year to get that level of distribution and be able to reach those audiences. And I think that's especially important for books for younger readers, especially because if you are a kid in school, then maybe you might not have like a credit card and the money on hand to be backing things like Kickstarters, but you can go to your public library and find books. So it is important for us as queer creators to be, actively thinking about like how do we work within those distribution channels and how do we try to widen access to those distribution channels, because that's going to get our books into places where, in particular, like young and low income readers are going to be able to get to them. So that's an evolving issue in comics right now, and I'm very happy every time that I hear news of another small press comics publisher who's like, we did it, we're like at the level where we could get into libraries now, we could get that distribution, but still have a ways to go. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch as comics history rolls on from here.
Yeah, and it's really I never had thought about it in terms before, maybe like 2 years ago, that libraries are one of the largest purchasers of books in I guess most countries, and yeah, because they'll buy like 12 copies of the same book, and in terms of sales as a creator, like that's a lot from one purchaser. That's a lot, and that's just for like one system in like one community. And then you think of like all the cities out there, and if all of them are buying like 5-10 copies of your book, that's why I'm just talking within the context of America where I live. That's a lot of books. That's a lot of books. That's not even counting like people buying personal copies. So.
Yeah, and that's a particular reason why it's important for us to
Sorry, Emma, did you have something to say?
To like protecting libraries, and look at the ways that say like Amazon is kind of attacking the ebook market, making it harder for libraries to get copies. But it's like, I remember talking to, kind of making a joke to Mariko Tamaki a while ago about like, didn't you have a book that was like banned in Florida or whatever? I think it was this one summer, right? And stuff like that. And you look at like the ways that the distribution can get limited. And it's just kind of like the tough things to try to be like pushing representation of why comics is doing so well, but then it gets targeted at the library level. I mean, I remember there was an anthology. I was interviewing the editors for the Artists Against Police Brutality anthology. And there was this one page that we were talking about, and it was like a gay couple that was getting busted up by the cops for like making out in public or whatever. And the editors were like, this was a really, really tough page for us, because they were like, we recognize the intersectionality of this issue, and we really wanted to acknowledge that, like, obviously there's queer, Black people and people of color who face both of these, but also, in every respect of the importance of that overlapping concern. But they're also sitting there where it's like, we know what the library situation, the book publishing situation is. And the conversation was, if we put this page in here, we might not make it into libraries in Florida. And it's just these ridiculous, terrible calculuses you have to have in your head when you're publishing this stuff. Like, this was an anthology that was like inspired by the Eric Garner book, the grand jury declining to prosecute the cops that killed him, and they have to think about, do we let this gay content into the comic and risk our distribution in Florida? Like, it's ridiculous, all the levels. But it's just kind of, you kind of have to have this like meta sense of the wider like politics around libraries and book distribution, all of these things. You just have to have longer antennas and a bigger awareness of the world when you're creating queer content, or when you're critiquing it or judging it. And just kind of like, there's so many more concerns that you have to deal with, right?
Bouncing off of that as well, even considering the kind of content that will be considered adult or will be considered YA is difficult when you're making queer content, because of just the way it's received just across even just the US. Maybe I live in California, it might be a little more accepted to put more queer content into younger stories, but depending on what you show and what you don't show, it may be, no matter how natural, no matter how simple and understandable it may seem to us as queer people, that content may just get you bumped up to a different category when you're trying to reach someone younger, or when you're trying to reach a wider breadth of readers. It's a hard call to make.
Well, I was just talking to Emmett Helen, who's a trans man cartoonist who has like a Riot Girl comic coming out, but we were kind of talking about just kind of the bizarre fallout of the whole like Batman stick incident. That I guess it just really caused like a huge crackdown at all of DC in terms of what you could show. And I kind of mentioned how I was like, how difficult that would be if you can't show a penis in any, DC Black Label comics. Then like, can you reclaim the depiction of trans women's bodies of that publisher? No, you can't, right? It's there's all these things, right? And allegedly, I don't know if this is true or not, that's why SFSX moved from Vertigo to Image, right? And so it creates all of these different situations. But like, his response to that, he's like, well, he's working more towards like webtoon and stuff like that now, and he's saying that like, if he has a trans male character who like hasn't gotten top surgery or anything like that, he can't show this male character topless and maintain a certain audience level because of what Instagram would call female presenting nipples, right? So you get into these binds where it's just like trans bodies just get trapped in all these stupid matrices that are just so cis heterocentric. And the YA market was brutal for that, because like I remember working at like a big bookstore in like the mid 2000s, and like the manga boom was happening, and they're like, okay, put this comic in like the 9 to 12 section, and I got into a flip through and I was like, there's boobs in this, and they're like, well, corporate wants us to put it there, and we put it in the other sections, and right, and I was like, okay, we're gonna get some letters from parents over this one, right? So it's just, yeah.
I feel like that's a great point. Sorry, did anyone want to add to that?
Oh, I have one fun anecdote about all this stuff. So Stage Dreams hasn't been challenged too much that I've heard of, at least. It's possible it has, and the stories just haven't made it back to me. But
great.
Before this, As the Crow Flies has been challenged quite a bit, and I have like I hear the weirdest stories from teachers about this. They'll send me things like a parent forwarded me a blog post that went through your entire book and counted how many curse words were in it as a way to challenge it. And they included words like "gay" as being a curse word. So strange things like that happen. Though I also feel like the small press, if we're looking specifically at books that are also existing in online spaces, like webcomics that later make it into print form as graphic novels, I do think that there can sometimes be a small advantage to that path when we're talking about things like books being, censored and suppressed at schools and libraries, especially for As the Crow Flies. It's always been very fun for me when, a kid will come up and tell me oh yeah, our school removed your book from our library, but it's a webcomic. So we'll get those books into their hands one way or another. We'll find a way. Those gay curse words.
Yeah. So, there's so much you've been talking about in the. Oh, go ahead.
I just small comment about that. I find it very, very funny that so enthusiastic about oh, it's a curse word, oh, it's a boo. They to learn about because of the societal norms, they're not allowed to see it. So it's I find it very endearing, honestly. That they're so eager, but we can't. It's a little heartbreaking. Can't get that. As much as we would like to, as much as we ourselves would have loved to see stuff like this when we were younger and been introduced to it, we can't, and we can't pay it forward. That's a little heartbreaking. Sorry, go ahead, Nina. Oh, sorry, Gabi. I thought Nina was talking.
Go ahead, Gabi. Yeah. So Gabi, say your piece, and then we will have to start the wrap up process. But go for it.
Well, to bring it back to small publishing, since it's been, I feel, in my opinion and in my experience, such a grassroots kind of approach to comics. I know that I've had family friends who've reached out and said, "Oh, my child or this child that I know has, is experiencing some things and has some, feelings and that are, they wouldn't say queer, but queer. And I've heard of your book, or your daughter did this book, or your granddaughter, and just so even though it has a smaller range, it's we're getting the books into their hands. We're getting these ideas and these different approaches to normalcy, to what should be normal, what should be normalized on a smaller scale, but on a very important smaller scale.
Yeah, I think that these are all really good points.
Something's better than nothing. So.
I'm so excited about everything that this group has been talking about this entire hour. There's so many things in here that are my personal jam. YA, the history of censorship of comics in America. I'm just going to do a quick shout out. If you don't know what the Comic Code Authority was, then you really, really, really need to look up what the Comic Code Authority was, because it shapes so much about American comics specifically, and how fear can totally redefine an entire industry. So, I want to talk to all of you after this, but I have to get ready for the awards, which are coming up next. So hopefully we'll stay in touch. And we've been thinking about a YA category for a while now, just considering lots of various logistics in terms of what does that mean. Does having a YA category mean that the other categories are not YA friendly, or not kid friendly, and kind of trying to make sure that we balance, and we want to push against the feedback that being queer isn't for kids, but how to best do that. So thank you for your input for that, because I will definitely be considering these pushes for a YA category for next year when we start planning. And I want to thank all of our, and I've got lots of juicy stories I'll have to tell you all about working in YA with kids stuff and queer stuff in the future. to hold my
I'll have to
tongue.
pull up a chair and like have a drink. It'll be great.
It'll be fantastic. Yeah, we'll do like a happy hour. So, anyway, thank you so much for your time and your efforts, both in being here for the panel and submitting and judging in particular. It's not easy, and we appreciate the effort of everyone involved on all sides. Before we wrap up and get ready for the awards, which will start at 4 o'clock, I want to make sure that everyone here gets a chance to let everyone know, how can we become your next biggest fan? How can we follow you, see what you're up to? And we'll go in the same order that everyone introduced themselves. We'll be excited to hear how we can follow up.
Awesome. Just one tiny little postscript before I give you my deeds, was that like the experience of judging is like, I kind of opened at the beginning and said, you know, it kind of reconnected in comics, but it's like, I want to say maybe 2 months into HRT, maybe like 1.5 when we started judging. And, you know, so running into, especially like trans girls at the town was a big deal for me, because there are all these great conversations that you don't ever see, but also like just the emotional changes of the medication were things that you never hear talked about. And I was like, this is a different unheard conversation. But then I was just like, which way? You can draw. It's time for you to actually like step up and start making comics, because you haven't done anything since you wrote that one script for Love is Love for DCIDW, like after Pulse shooting. So now I'm like over 80 instances into a daily strip that's extremely adult and hosted on OnlyFans, but is also slowly coming out on other platforms. So like just getting to see it and getting to reconnect with my own community within comics just made me make that leap to finally becoming primarily a cartoonist. So like just getting to engage with your own community within the industry is such a hugely profound thing that is going to change and reshape my life for the next like fucking decade. But yeah, so I'm Veronique houxbois. The best way to find me is on Twitter at EMMA HOUXBOIS. There's a link tree in my bio, so you can find all the little things that I do everywhere else. But yeah, I have a Patreon that's solely doing like a trans studies course, and I'm like solely posting some of my comics and collections of them to like itch.io and stuff like that. But that's me, and thank you for your time, and like so excited for the awards coming up.
All right. So I've been Gabi Mendez, and I'm mostly on Twitter and Instagram, I guess, both under houxbois, which is HOBBLESHMOBBLE. And I post art and I talk more on Twitter, and working on some fun stuff, working on my own comics and maybe some pitches that maybe you'll see. Who knows? But that's where you can follow up with me.
And best places to find me online are probably like the usual social media platforms. I think I'm Mel Gillman on Twitter and Tumblr, and M Gillman on Instagram. I've been very quiet on all those social medias lately because I'm working on a ton of books which are like unannounced right now, so I just haven't been able to say anything about what I've been working on. So there's a lot of posts about me like hunting mushrooms in the woods right now. The most queer content about
Ideal. Very ideal. Cool. And I guess lastly, again, I'm Noella Whitney, Butch Lesbian Cartoonist. You can find me on Twitter at no_WHIT. Links to like everything else that I do is there. My Instagram, same handle. My Gumroad, my Patreon, my website, everything's there. And as a project, I'm not working on creating anything right now because I actually just moved back from Japan like a month and a half ago. Still getting my feet back on, but I made it. But actually, right before coronavirus happened, I finished the sequel comic to my Prism Award winning comic, and I will be releasing that in the next couple of weeks. And I'm very, very excited about that. that, and the second one packs a bigger wallop than the first. I can guarantee you that based on feedback. So, yeah, that's about it from me.
Awesome. Thank you again. Oh, was there any last? No problem. Okay. All right. Thank you again to everybody that was part of this panel, that has been part of this whole weekend celebration. All of the videos will be up to view after the fact. So if there's anyone you want to share them with, who this would be meaningful to share these conversations, for them to hear them, please feel free to pass the videos along and spread them far and wide. You know, the whole point here is pushing things forward and creating more of an opportunity for that education and empathy and commiseration. So we appreciate all that everyone involved, from viewers to finalists to judges, to our co-chair and our planning committee. Thank you to everyone. And we will be right back at 4 o'clock. We will start the actual Prism Awards. Finally time to see what the cream of the crop has come through. And we're also, I'm just going to reiterate one last time, we say this all the time as part of the Prism Awards, you know, the fact, those that made it to be finalists, it's so much work and so much dedication to get there, and we really appreciate all of that. You know, if we when we get a bigger budget, maybe we'll just give everybody lots of awards all the time. So we definitely appreciate all of our finalists' work. So as part of the award ceremony tonight, you will not only see acceptance speeches from the award winners themselves, but you will get some really impactful words from each and every one of our finalists tonight. So make sure to tune in and catch everything. All right, thanks so much.